Welcome back to another episode. Let's understand mathematics. Let's get to part 2 of simplifying exponential expressions. So we have another example here, so let's get to it. So we have 3x cubed n to the power of -1, all of that raised to the power of 3. So what are we doing here? So if you notice, if you want me to break this down for you, what are we doing here? We are basically multiplying 3 times x cubed times n to the power of -1, and we are raising that to the power of 3, to the power of 3 or cubed. We're just raising it to the power of 3. So since x and n are unknown in this expression, when you multiply it, you would just have to 3x cubed n to the power of -1. That's what we have here. So what are we doing? We are taking the power of a product, or product raised to a power. So product raised to a power reminds us of one rule. So basically it's all about just looking at it and identifying which rule is being applied here, which rule can we apply here. So if you notice, our first rule on here, it's the power of a product rule. So what do? Now we are distributing the exponent on the outside of the bracket to each of the bases inside. And remember, we should also consider this number here, because many people just use the unknown bases. We just distribute the exponent on the outside, the power on the outside to the bases, the unknown bases. We forget about the coefficient here, so we shouldn't forget about that. So 3 to the power of 3. Make sure we do it to the coefficient. We distribute the exponent on the outside to the coefficient, then x to the power of 3 times 3. Because we have an exponent here, we have to multiply the exponents. Because remember, power to a power. Remember that rule? If we have a power and we're raising it to a power, we are multiplying the exponents. So we're multiplying the exponents now. Okay, so basically we're using two rules in one example. So since this one had no exponent, we just distributed to the number, the coefficient itself. But this one, it's basically, now we're using a second rule. We're using the power to a power rule. So we're multiplying the exponents now. Same thing here. And we have a -1 exponent, power to a power. So -1 times 3. So now we just have to solve. So 3 to the power of 3, 3 times 3 times 3, 3 times 3, 9, 9 times 3, 27. 27 times x, 27, and then we have x to the power of 3 times 3. So 3 times 3 times x to the power of 9. And then we have n. n to the power of -1 times 3. Okay, 27 times x9 times n to the power of -3. Now we could just multiply it, but you'd have to remember that there's also one more step. Before, as we simplified, we noticed first we had the power of a product rule, and then when we went to the next step, we noticed we have a power to a power rule. So we had to multiply the exponents. Once we did that, we noticed now we have a third rule we have to apply, which is the negative exponent rule, or the negative power rule, or law. So 27 times x to the power of 9 times, we take the reciprocal 1 over n to the power of 3, n to the power of 3. So we have now we have something in the bottom now. To the power of 3 in the bottom, we know. So 27 times x to the power of 9 times 1. 27 times 1, 27. 27 x to the power of 9. And that is how we solve this expression. So notice first, I realized if we break this down, we're basically multiplying 3 times x to the power of 3 times n to the power of -1. That's what we're doing here. But since we don't know the values for x and n, we're just multiplying. We leave it like this. So we know we're taking the power of a product. So when you're taking the power of a product, we distribute the exponent to each of the bases, including the coefficient. And when we did that, we realized that, make sure we do this, because a lot of people forget that. So 3 to the power of 3 times we have an exponent here. So we're using a second rule. Second rule is power to a power rule. So we're multiplying the exponent since we have exponents here. This one we didn't have exponents, so we were just able to distribute the cube to this coefficient here, the exponent here to that coefficient. Here we have to use the power to a power rule. 3 times 3, x times, we multiplied the exponents. Then once we did that, 27 times x to the power of 9 times n to the power of -3. We could have multiplied it. We would have got 27x9 n -3, but we forgot that we have a negative exponent rule, so we must use that rule in order to simplify it properly. Times 1 over n to the power of 3. We're using the reciprocal, the law, and then 27 times, and then we just multiply. We just organize it, and then we just multiply it together. We realize we have n to the power of 3 in the bottom, and then in the top we have 27 to the power of x, 27 x to the power of 9. If we are given the value of x and n, we can then solve it, but this is the simplified version of simplified form of this. So that's how we simplify exponential expressions. Once again, we'll see each other in the next video. Thank you.